Hey guys, it's me again. I am here with a super quick Tuesday writing tips video for you all. I'm sorry about the poor lighting. Actually, give me 1 second. Let me see if I can make this better. Okay, so maybe that's a little better. Anyway, tonight's video is going to be really short. I just want to give you guys some tips. Tonight's topic is on creating characters. There are several different ways to kind of think through or decide who your characters are going to be. And of course, the characters are the heart of the story. So sometimes there's this discussion between a plot-driven story or a character-driven story, but the reality is that all stories are character-driven because you can put a person in the same set of circumstances and their response, their reaction is going to vary depending on who they are as a person. So even if your story is very action-packed, intricate, complicated plot, your characters are still what make the story. They are what determine what happens in the story because their reactions and the choices that they make are everything to the story. And your characters are what your readers are going to connect with. Even if you have an awesome world, you have an awesome plot, if your characters are uninteresting, or they feel flat, or they don't feel realistic, or they're not relatable, then your story is not going to be what it could have been, what it may have had the potential to be. So real quick, there are a couple of things that I just want to throw out there in terms of creating relatable characters, believable characters, characters that your readers will connect with and remember. So the first is a character interview. So this is basically a list of questions that you go through and you answer them as if you were your character. So imagine that you were able to sit down in an interview and ask your character a bunch of questions. You as the author answer these questions as your character would answer them. So word for word, whatever your character would say, you imagine that you write that down. And the questions can vary from, what is your height? What is your hair color? All the way to really deep internal kind of questions like, what was the moment in your life that impacted you the most? Or what is your biggest secret fear? The fear that people don't know you have. So the questions can vary from kind of objective surface level to like very detailed. You can create your own questions to ask your character, or you can use a pre-created list. So if you're looking for a list to give you some ideas of the types of things to ask your characters, K.M. Wayland has a really good blog post that actually has a list of like interview questions for characters. So her website is called helpingwritersbecomeauthors.com. And if you go there and you search for a blog post called Interviewing Your Characters, she actually has a list of, I think, like more than 100 questions that you can use. You can use all of them, you can use some of them, but it's a great starting point. The other thing that I found helpful is a Skillshare video by Lindsay Summers. So she is a Wattpad author. She has a book that has like the first time I checked, it was 84 million reads. It's more than that now. It got picked up and is actually being published in print as well. But she did a Skillshare video called Writing a Character Study. And she kind of walks through her process for creating characters. It's very similar to the interview process, but it's a lot less intense than the other one. So it doesn't have hundreds of questions. It has just kind of a few of the most important questions, like to help you figure out what your character's likes and dislikes are, what their goals are. So that video is helpful if you're just starting out creating characters. I watched the video when I was in a spot where I was just kind of stuck with some characters, and it kind of just gave me a kickstart. It got my brain going again. So if you go to Skillshare.com, they have a lot of classes for free, and this is one of the free ones. And it's by Lindsay Summers, and it's called Writing a Character Study. I think there's it's part of a series of videos put up by Wattpad authors, so I think there's like another part of the title before that, but that's the specific part of the title about what her video is. So for me personally, I do sort of a combination of interview questions and the character study. Um, and then I don't just work from that. So let me just explain in case this is helpful to anyone, because different things work for different people. So let me just kind of explain to you my process. So when I first start a story, I kind of do my own custom interview. So I write down basic things about who they are as a person, what is sort of their goal in life, what do they want from life, what are they afraid of. Um, More specifically, I try to decide what might their lie be. So if you're not familiar with that terminology, I'll probably cover it in more detail in another video, but the lie is the thing that the character believes to be true about life or about themselves that really isn't. So it's what kind of holds them back from reaching their potential. So I decide what that is for my character. Um, I decide who in their life they trust, who they don't trust, what past relationship hurts they might have that might impact future relationships. So I kind of create like a little mini backstory in bullet point form for my character. Just kind of summarizing what experiences in their life have made them who they are today, and who are they now. And from that, then, I kind of have an idea of how they would react to future situations. So, for example, in my I'm Not a Stalker on Wattpad, in that story, my characters have these histories of past relationships that didn't go well in very specific ways. So those specific incidents, for Anissa, it's being rejected, being told that she's not wanted anymore. And for Hunter, it's something different. But each of them have these specific triggers then that cause them to act irrationally in the present. So they're not fully aware of it, but it just kind of rises up as a hurt, and so it causes them to overreact to things sometimes, or to put up a wall or to get defensive. And so knowing that about their past really helped me figure out how they would react to each other in this story as they interacted in the story. So what I do is I start with this sort of outline, bullet point, very simple kind of summary of their past, and that gives me an idea of who they are now. I also include in that hobbies, things that they're really into. For Hunter, he likes comic books and he likes cats. He has one. And for the Secret Admirer, when I made the list for that, there were things that he was going to be sharing in the clues. And I wanted, for the purpose of that story specifically, I wanted the clues to sort of create ambiguity. I didn't want the answer to be immediately obvious. So the clues then lined up with several different characters, like they could match multiple characters. And so then I crafted the Secret Admirer's persona around that. I crafted some of the characters around that, about them having things in common or things that looked like they were in common, all because of the framework of what I was planning for my story. But I didn't stop there. And this is maybe what I do differently that not all writers do. I work from an outline, whether it's plot or characters, but I don't plan out every little detail. So what I usually do if I'm really wanting to get to know a character is I start with that interview kind of bullet point list, but then I just kind of pick some key moments, some key scenes, and I write them out. And as I'm writing them, I try to just be in the character's head and respond as I think they would respond. And a lot of times what happens is I think of things as I'm writing that scene that give me more information, more clarity about the character. So I had one character, I didn't really even know he was a runner, a cross-country runner, until I sat down to write a scene, and I thought, okay, where am I going to set this? What is he going to be doing? And the idea came to me that he was a runner. And as I explored that, I realized, yes, of course he's a runner. It makes perfect sense because he was athletic already. And this became a huge part of who he is and what drives him, and it wasn't there originally. So I wouldn't have discovered that if I hadn't really started to write the scene. So with I'm Not a Stalker, a lot of those scenes actually came out at the end. So I'd already written the story, but as I wrote these additional scenes that my readers were requesting, I learned so much more about my characters. And then those scenes are now expanding my view of the characters as I write the sequels to the book. So I'm able to now write in other points of view of other characters because I explored them so thoroughly as I was writing these additional scenes and thinking through things. So, you would pick pivotal moments maybe in your character's life, either in the past or in the present, like recent past, or the present. For example, maybe the first time he fell in love. What was it like? When did it happen? How did it happen? How did he meet his best friend? How did they interact? You're going to learn a lot about your character by the kind of friend he has and by how their interaction plays out. When and how did his first date happen? Was he nervous? How did he dress? How did he act? These are scenes that are formative in a person's life, and so they're formative for your character as well. If you think of your character as a real person and you write out the scenes, you may be surprised by what kind of clicks and makes sense. And suddenly you're like, I understand this character better now. My thought is that yes, you're creating the character, but it also has to flow naturally. So I keep the list of facts about the character to refer back to make sure I'm being consistent with who the character is, who I created them to be. But then I also give myself room to write out the character in that mindset and see what develops, see what evolves. And then the last thing I use, and some of you may have access to this if you write on a forum like Wattpad or on a blog or something else public, or if you're in a group or you have beta readers. Reader questions have been so helpful for me because sometimes they'll ask me a question or they'll make a comment that make me realize something about my character. So they'll say, wow, that was rude. And I'll read the comment and I'll say, yeah, it was rude of her, or, that really didn't make sense. So then I'll think, okay, but when I wrote it that way because I believe that that's how the character would actually respond. So then I ask myself, okay, why did I think the character would respond that way? And usually I have an immediate answer because when I wrote the story, I did think through the reactions and I did write it that way for a reason. But it deepens my understanding of the character because it encourages me to kind of explain the character's reactions in a succinct way. And then suddenly I'm saying to myself, she has trust issues. She really has a hard time letting people in because anytime she starts to feel threatened, she throws up these walls because in the past, anytime she's been vulnerable, she's been hurt. Now, this is a deep insight into the character that I had before, but I hadn't really articulated in that way. And being able to put it in those words deepens my grasp of the character, even though I knew it before, maybe I hadn't really thought of it in that exact specific way. So the reader questions have really been helpful for me in even deepening my understanding of my characters, or at least my ability to explain them, to articulate it. And then, of course, that informs how I'm going to write them in future scenes because I can add that to my list of things that I know about them. And then when I write future scenes, I make sure that their reactions are true to that thing that I've discovered about them. Writing characters is really interesting because, yes, you're creating them, but they also have to feel like real people. So if, at least in my experience, if I stick too closely to a bullet list, they feel flat. They don't feel real. But once I've kind of written out the scenes and I've explored them and given the characters freedom to kind of play things out on the page, I feel like then the characters feel more rounded and they feel more realistic whenever I write future scenes, even if those scenes that I wrote exploring the character never really end up in the story, they're still useful. And it's hard for me sometimes to justify spending the time writing scenes that may not end up in the story at all because my time is limited. I am a mom and I work part-time and I have a lot of things going on. But it really is worth it because it makes the characters so much more relatable. They feel so much more realistic. They have depth to them. And so for me, it's worth the time. So if you have any questions about this, you can post it below. I will be writing a blog post about developing characters probably next week sometime. My blog posts go up on Mondays. These videos go up on Tuesdays. So maybe by next Monday, you'll see the post pop up I think that's what I'll write on next week probably, is a little more information about developing characters. So in the meantime, if you have questions or if there's anything specific you'd like for me to cover in that blog post on Monday, post it here below the video. And thank you guys so much for watching. Bye.